In this session, we're going to look at how to make decisions in a programming language. Being able to make decisions allows us to provide alternate paths through our code so that we can accomplish different things given different circumstances. The first thing we're going to look at is making simple decisions. And what that means is we're going to look at a condition. Might be whether something is less than a particular value or it's between a range of values, and if that condition is true, then we're going to do a particular action or a particular task. And what that allows us to do is provide different paths through a program. So if, for example, we come down here and we test our condition, and it is true, we're going to come down and we're going to do this action, whatever that happens to be. When that's finished, we're going to continue on with the rest of the program. If, though, we come through and we test that condition and it's false, we're going to skip that block of code and come down and continue on with the rest of the program. So here we're looking at a flow chart of a simple if block. Over here we can see that same thing represented in pseudocode. So here's our test where the condition is true. If that condition is true, we're going to do these actions and then continue on. If the condition is false, we're going to skip that set of instructions and continue on. So here we can see our pseudocode. We can see our flowchart representing the same simple decision. And here we have our actual C code. So let's take a look at what we've got here. First thing is we have our if block, or our if statement. So what we can see right here is the condition that we're going to test. So here we're going to say if the length is less than some minimum value. If it's true, we're going to execute these two lines of code. So we're going to print the length is too short, and then we're going to set it to a default value. If the test fails, we're going to come down and we're going to execute whatever code is in the next line. So it's going to skip these two print lines and not do them at all. Here's a second example down here, and in this case we can see our test is a multiple test now. We're saying if the length is greater than the minimum value and it's also less than the maximum value, then we're going to set the area equal to the length times the width. Notice this is our assignment variable here, and area is the variable that's going to get assigned. Now sometimes when we're making decisions, we want to do one action if the condition is met, but we want to do something else if the condition isn't met. So here, let's look at the pseudocode first. So we have our condition. If the condition is true, then we're going to perform a specific action. Otherwise, or else, we're going to do something else. If we look at the flow chart over here, we can see that same thing. So here we test our first condition. If it's true, we perform this action, and then we continue on through the rest of the program. If we test the first condition and it's false, we're going to follow this path. We're going to do these actions and rejoin the rest of the program down here. You'll notice with all of these, both the simple if structure we looked at before and this if structure we're looking at now, we have one input right here, and we have one output from the loop. We saw the same thing with the simple if structure. Now we're going to look at a couple of C examples for an if-else structure. So let's look at our first test. We say, is the temperature less than normal? If it is, we're going to print it's cool outside. If it's not less than normal, we're going to print the temperature is normal for this time of year. So one test, two conditions, a true and a false. Now we come down here. In this case, we have a multiple test. So we're checking if the angle is equal to 90, or a double pipe symbol is an OR condition. The angle is equal to 270. So remember, our comparison operator is a double equal sign as opposed to a single equal sign, which is an assignment operator. If either of those conditions is met, we're going to print the tan of something is undefined. What's going to get substituted in for the %d is the value that angle has. If the test fails, we're going to print the tan of whatever is a value. We're going to print the tan of whatever our angle is the actual value. Now sometimes we need to do even more than one test. So we have one action that if that certain condition is met, if it isn't met, then we want to do another test. And we can actually nest these a few deep. So let's look at what happens. Let's look at our flow chart here. So we come through and we say, if the condition is true, we're going to come down, we're going to execute this, and then continue on through to the rest of the program. If we come through and the condition is false, we come along and we do another test. So here is condition number 2 true. If it is, we're going to come down, execute the alternate tasks, and then come through. So we have a second path. We can also have a third path. So we test our first condition, it's false. We come across, we test our second condition, it's false. We execute the other actions. When we come down, execute the rest of the program. So here we have 2 tests and 3 possible paths. Again, we have 1 input, 1 output to our block. We can see that same thing in pseudocode. Here's our first test. If that test is true, we perform specific actions. Otherwise, we do another test. If that's true, we do these actions. Otherwise, we do the last set of actions. The general style rule here is when you do a test, you do an action in the if part and subsequent tests in the else part. If we look at the C code for a nested loop, we have a print statement first that says the background is, and then we do a test. If the background color is blue, we're going to print blue. Otherwise, we're going to check to see if the background color is green. If it is, we'll print green. Otherwise, we'll print our default value of yellow. Sometimes we're testing one particular variable for a number of different values, and this is often used to replace a nested if-else block. So what we have and what we can do is say, if we test our first case and it equals a value, then we'll do this operation. We come out, come to the end, and go through to the rest of the program. If it's not case 1, we come to case 2, we perform these actions, and come down. Same thing, if it's not case 1, it's not case 2, maybe we get all the way down to case n, so maybe this is case number 10. We come through, we perform these actions, and come through here. If we've come all the way through and we haven't met any of the cases, we come through and we do a default case. Now this is optional, there doesn't have to be a default case, but sometimes it's a good thing just to make sure that you're going to catch any possible errors. If we look at the pseudocode, we see our test here. So there's the variable we're going to test. And here's our first case. So that first case has a particular value. Maybe it's the value 1, or maybe it's the color blue. If that's the case, we're going to perform some specific actions. We test the next case, perform actions for that, all the way down to the last case, and perform actions for that. So if we look at this in C code, we're going to use what's called a switch structure. So our keyword is switch. The variable that we're going to check is put inside brackets, so we have switch background color. Then we're going to list all our cases here. The last one will be the default case. So case is a keyword. We follow that by a value and a colon. And if the case is blue, we're going to print the string blue, and then we need this break to skip over the rest of the cases and get to the end. If the case isn't blue, it will come down and it will check to see if it's green. If it's green, it will print green and break to the end. If it's not green, it will test for yellow. If it is, it will print yellow, then break to the end. And in this case, so if it wasn't blue or green or yellow, it will print white. So we have four main ways of making decisions. The first is a simple if block. So we can see here we test a condition, and if that condition is true, we do some action. The second one is a little more complicated. If it's an if-else block, and we can see an example, we do a test. If the test is true, we do one set of actions, otherwise we do another. The third is a nested if-else block. And we can see in our example that we do a test. If it's true, we do one action, otherwise we do another test. If it's true, we do this action, otherwise we do the last action. And finally, if we have a lot of different cases for one particular variable that we're testing, we use a switch case. Switch is our keyword. There's the variable we're testing. Here are each of the cases, and it's important to remember that we do the actions and then we have a break that takes us down to the end.